Hello and welcome to Cheshire Audio. Now, I want to talk about concept albums. I was talking to a friend the other day about this, and I don't think we'll see their like again. And whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But there's a few contributory factors to this, I think. And that's what I was going to do the video on. I've also got a couple of concept albums just to talk about as well, because. I actually feel as though the whole digital thing kind of killed it. Because if you think about it, the concept albums sort of started around the end of the 60s, sort of 67, 68. There's been a few over the years, and we've got the obvious ones like War of the Worlds and Tommy and that sort of thing. Probably finishing up with, you could almost argue that the Pink Floyd The Wall is a concept album, and possibly the Final Cut, I suppose. But yeah, that's the sort of spread of it, and you don't really get anything after that. And I think that a lot of it is because with a concept album, the whole idea is you start at the beginning and you listen all the way through. And as soon as CD became a thing, it's funny. I had very similar conversations with people about CD. When they'd buy a CD player, and you sort of say, well, you do realise that it's not as good as a record, but it is. I've heard that it's much, much better, and the discs are only really small, and it's going to be so much better. And you can choose tracks, and you can do this, and you can do that. And they'd buy the CD players, and next time they came in, they were sort of overly pushing how good they thought their CD player was, but they were trying to change the system because the CD player was too good. And I think I've said this before on here. Usually when people say things like that, it's because they're not happy with the sort of musicality of the system anymore. Most of these people will say, oh, I need more bass, I need bigger speakers, I need this, I need that. Because the CD player, it's so good and it's so much better than my system now that I need to improve it. And they were completely missing the point, that the factory source is the most important part. And if you're not enjoying the system, it's the source is the issue, really. But they wouldn't be told. And I found that a lot of people, their main criteria when they were buying CD players, they wanted shuffle play. They wanted to be able to program tracks so they could listen in a different order. I even had people sort of say, well, there's A, B, and C. A is the best sounding. B is intermediate. C sounds the worst, but it's got all the features on. Oh, well, I'll have C because it's got shuffle play. And it was really infuriating, really infuriating. But you sort of have to go, the customer is always right, so you have to go with it, really, don't you? But I think a lot of that is the reason that the sort of demise of the concept album, because people didn't listen to whole albums anymore. And if you think about it, if you use shuffle play on a concept album, it's not going to work. It's a crazy idea, and yeah, I don't know. It was just, and I think also if you look now, we've gone another step. If you look at streaming, I've watched people when they use it, and they don't really play a whole. Never mind not playing a whole album. They don't play a whole track. They're sort of flicking through all the time. When they're listening to a track, they're looking for the next track to play. And oh yes, I'll play this, and I'll play this, and they jump and they jump and they jump, and they don't actually settle down and just listen to a whole album anymore. So the whole art, I mean, forgetting concept albums actually, the whole art of creating an album is quite a carefully chosen sort of sequence of a quieter album, a quieter track that will build to a more dynamic track, and everything complements everything else. And a lot of time would be spent in creating a running order on an album. So I think we've no chance that nothing like this will ever appear again. And it's sad in a way. I think the only thing with concept albums is I think sometimes you'll find a little bit like sort of music from theatre, from musical theatre and things like that. There's sometimes some fairly dodgy tracks, I suppose, if you're going to really sort of be a bit mean about it. But saying that, there's also an awful lot of really sort of brilliant inventiveness of it, sort of the actual, some of the ideas. You imagine you're trying to write a track about a specific subject. That's an art in itself, but going one step further and writing a whole album about it and a progression through a story and things like that, that's a different thing entirely. So I think it's a shame. To me, I think it's a shame. I think the death of the concept album is a big shame. And on that note, I just want to talk through a few. I'll admit it now. I was completely devastated because when I was thinking about doing this video, I thought, yeah, well, I've got this, and I've got this, and I've got this, and I'll get all those out, and I'll take them into the shop, and I can talk through. I've lost my favourite album of all the ones I was looking for. Has disappeared completely. I've been through my collection about 4 times now, literally pulling all the albums out, checking inside them, make sure it's not slid inside. I've checked all the records here about 3 or 4 times. Completely gone. I've absolutely no explanation because I don't lend records out. I have no idea where it's gone. I was even starting to doubt that I'd ever bought it, but I've actually got a little list of all my albums, and it's listed as a thing I have bought. I do own it, and I do remember it. Luckily, I have actually got the CD as well, so I'm going to have to use the CD. But anyway, first of all, I mean, people would say that this is the first concept album. It isn't. I mean, this was, what was it, 70? I remember it coming out, it was about 75. Yeah, I should have checked this before. I think it's 75, isn't it? Let's say it's 75. Actually, I'm going to check that now because I'm really doubting myself. It's... Oh, really? 78. 1978, yeah, I do remember it coming. I remember there's a big displays in the local record shop of this with like big, almost like film type advertising hoardings and things like that when this came out. And it's a great album. I mean, it's David Essex and various people, Jeff Wayne and everybody on it, and it follows a story, and it basically follows the story of the book, doesn't it? Give or take. And it was very, very successful, probably one of the most successful of all the concept albums, to be honest. Well, apart from possibly Tommy. Now, I don't own Tommy, and people will be shouting at the screen now, because I don't really get on with the Who very well. As a band, I've never really liked, apart from a couple of the hits, I've never really liked them very much, so I never bought it. I have listened to it, and it's got its moments, but generally I didn't really like Tommy very much. After this, well, what I think is probably the first concept album, and I might be wrong on this, but I think it probably is the first concept album, is the Pretty Things SF Sorrow. From 1968. I'm not going to check that because I'm pretty sure it's 68. 1968. And this tells a story as well. This follows the life of Private SF Sorrow, or SF Sorrow, from birth through through working in a factory, going into the army, having a girlfriend, losing his girlfriend. I think she dies on the Hindenburg. And then he sort of descends into mental illness, basically. So that it sort of starts off all happy, then descends. But this is musically brilliant. There's some amazing tracks on this. The whole thing, SF Sorrow is Born, and She Says Good Morning, and Private Sorrow. Balloon Burning is a great track. Barren Saturday is a good track. And it's Loneliest Person, which is where it ends up. Sort of, you might be the loneliest person in the world, but you'll never be as lonely as me. It's probably the saddest track ever written, I think, really. But that is a great album. Nice gatefold, great artwork on the back there. I mean, Pretty Things are a great band. I mean, I've got a few albums of theirs, but this is definitely a highlight. I really love this. Also, and slightly more controversially, but this is an interesting album. This is the one I'd lost, and I'm going to say it again. Devastated. I've lost it. I don't know where it could possibly be. There's nowhere it can be, but anyway. Aphrodite's Child, I'll put it close so it looks like an LP. Aphrodite's Child, 666. Now this is really interesting, this one. This kind of might be an argument for why the concept album is a bit dodgy. It's a double album. I would say the first side of the first album is brilliant. There's some amazing tracks on it, really, really good stuff. And most of the second side of the first disc is really, really good. Second disc is awful. Mostly it's awful. I think there's a track with a girl screaming for 2 minutes. So there's an awful lot of filling out and whatever. But it's roughly based on, very roughly, to be honest, the Book of Revelation. So it works through the Four Horsemen and the Seventh Seal and all this sort of thing. It's a work of genius, most of it. I mean, it's absolutely astonishingly good. The interesting thing about this is, I was going to use this as a competition question, but I'm going elsewhere with that now. I've decided to use a different question. But this is Vangelis, and in partnership with, and this is just it always amazes me, Demis Roussos. If you remember Demis Roussos in the 70s, he was sort of the housewife's favourite, wasn't he? He was sort of all the middle of the road. I mean, to be fair, I actually really liked. I think was it Forever and Ever. I think that was a great pop song. But for him to turn up on something like this, which is about 1971. For him to turn up on something like this, and then a couple of years later be doing Forever and Ever on Top of the Pops, is something else really. But his voice really works on this because it's very ethereal. There's like little bells on it and chanting, and there's a lot of spoken word on it. And his voice it seems to come out of the ether in this high pitched voice of his, and it's like I say, it's mostly a work of genius. The rest of it's awful. So you have to sort of pick and choose. I think this one probably, shuffle play might be a good idea. No, probably be able to program out all the stuff you don't like, because it doesn't really particularly follow through a story. It is just based on the Book of Revelation. So it is a concept album, but it's not a storytelling album quite in the same way as, say, War of the Worlds is or SF Sorrow is. So yeah, that's. I'm going to go home and have another look for that, because it's really. I also thought, well, I'm going to have to buy another copy of it on vinyl. And an original Vertigo, the prices were somewhere between £200 and £700 for an original Vertigo version of Aphrodite's Child. So I may not be going there. I might have to get a later one. But anyway, so I'm going to leave it there. Like I say, I think digital killed the concept album. Now, whether or not you think that is good or bad. I think it's bad. I think it's not just me having a hatred of digital, because I think CD is actually quite good now, but I think it's just the whole way it's used has sort of killed this whole genre, really. Yeah, like I say, gonna leave it there. Thanks for watching. I will be doing some more videos of reviews and things like that. I promise again, because people keep asking about this, I'm going to do another tweakery video. I've got quite a special one that I'm going to try and line up, but I need to borrow something. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a like, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you very much.